Have you ever had one of those moments where you're trying to fix something? Maybe it's a piece of furniture or a complicated toy for a kid, and you're struggling with it for what feels like hours? You're pushing, you're pulling, you're sweating a little bit, and you're convinced that the pieces just don't fit together. And then, suddenly, you apply just the right amount of pressure in just the right spot, and you hear it, that click, that perfect, satisfying sound of everything finally snapping into alignment. Suddenly, the thing that was a source of total frustration becomes a functional tool. Building wealth is exactly like that. For the first few years, it feels like you're just forcing pieces together that don't want to fit. You're saving, you're sacrificing, you're checking your accounts, and honestly, it mostly just feels like work. But then, you hit a very specific, very strange number. It isn't the $1 million mark the gurus talk about, and it isn't the six-figure milestone everyone obsesses over. For most people who are actually in the trenches, the moment everything finally clicks, the moment the math starts to outpace the effort, is right around $75,000. Hey, my name is Kira, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same financial patterns for decades. I've become obsessed with this specific $75,000 threshold because, after looking at the data and talking to hundreds of people about their journeys, I've realized it's the exact point where the gravity of your life shifts. It's the point where you stop working for your money, and your money starts, it starts showing up to work on time and actually pulling its weight. If you're currently at $10,000 or $30,000 and you're wondering why it still feels like a constant uphill battle, or if you've just hit that $75,000 mark and you're noticing this weird sense of calm you can't quite explain, that's what we're going to explore. Because what nobody tells you is that $75,000 is the escape velocity of personal finance. We're going to talk about the invisible employee, the death of the emergency mindset, and why this is the stage where you finally stop worrying about the price of eggs and start worrying about the quality of your decades. So let's start with the most objective part of this, the cold, hard math. When you have $5,000 saved, a 7% return in the market gives you $350 a year. It's fine. It buys you a nice dinner and maybe a new pair of shoes. It's not life-changing. It doesn't feel like your money is working for you. It feels like your money is just sitting there, occasionally tossing you a nickel. But when you cross $75,000, the math undergoes a fundamental transformation. At a 7% to 8% return, that $75,000 is generating somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 a year in growth. Now think about that for a second. Basically, your money is now earning as much as a part-time job. You have an invisible employee working in the background, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Basically, you've reached the point where your wealth is growing by an amount that actually rivals your own contributions. If you're saving $1,000 a month from your paycheck, your investments are now doing about 50% of the heavy lifting. This is the click. It's the realization that you aren't the only one pushing the boulder anymore. Someone or something is on the other side of the boulder pushing back with you. I remember the first time I realized this in my own journey. I was looking at my year-end statement, and I noticed the market gain line. For years, that number was so small it felt like a rounding error. But when it crossed that threshold, I realized that my money had made more that year than I had saved through months of grueling no-spend challenges and skipping vacations. It's a surreal feeling. It's the moment you realize that the system is actually starting to work for you instead of against you. When you have $10,000 or $20,000, you have an emergency fund. That's great. It keeps the lights on if you lose your job. But psychologically, you're still in a defensive crouch. You're constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting for the big one to hit, the transmission failure, the medical bill, the roof leak. You have the money to cover it, but you know that if you do cover it, you'll be back to square one. But at $75,000? The emergency mindset starts to die, and it's replaced by what I call the inconvenience mindset. At this level of liquidity, there are very few normal life events that can actually derail you. A $4,000 car repair isn't a tragedy that sets you back a year. It's a Tuesday. It's a line item. It's an inconvenience. You pay it, you move on, and your total net worth barely flinches, because the market fluctuations on a random Thursday probably move your account by that much anyway. This shift is massive for your mental health. Honestly, the amount of cortisol, that stress hormone, that leaves your system when you realize you are unbankruptable by normal life, is worth more than the money itself. You start walking differently. You start sleeping differently. You stop viewing the world as a series of traps and start viewing it as a landscape you're actually allowed to walk through. This is my favorite part of the $75,000 milestone. And it's something people rarely talk about in career advice. We talk about FU money, right? That mythical amount where you can tell your boss to take a hike and retire to an island. Usually people think that requires millions. But there is a junior version of that power that kicks in at $75,000. When you have $75,000 in the bank or in a brokerage account, you are no longer a wage slave. Even if you have a mortgage and kids, $75,000 represents a year, or maybe even two, of complete survival if you're lean. This gives you a quiet power in the workplace. Think about the last time you were in a meeting and you wanted to speak up about a bad decision, but you didn't because you were afraid of being labeled difficult. Or the last time you wanted to negotiate for a raise but you felt like you had no leverage. When you have $75,000, that fear, it just kind of evaporates. You aren't reckless, but you are honest. You realize that if they fired you tomorrow, you wouldn't be in a breadline. You'd be fine for a long, long time. And here's the irony. When you stop being afraid of losing your job, you actually become better at it. You take more risks, you're more authoritative, and you're more willing to lead. I've seen so many people get promoted after they hit this savings milestone because they finally started acting like the person they were meant to be, instead of the person who was scared of a missed paycheck. At $75,000, you also become remarkably immune to the sales pitch of modern consumerism. When we are struggling, we are very susceptible to the idea that a new thing will fix our lives. We buy the status symbol because we want to feel like we're succeeding. We buy the convenience item because we're too stressed to cook or clean. But when you have $75,000, you already know you're succeeding. You have the receipt in your bank account. You don't need the $800 a month SUV to prove to your neighbors that you're doing well. You know you're doing well because you could buy 5 of those SUVs in cash if you were dumb enough to want to. This is the point where you start to value time and autonomy over stuff. You'd rather have this $75,000 growing in the background, buying you future days of freedom, than a pile of leather and metal in the driveway that is slowly rotting away. You start to see through the marketing. You realize that most of the people around you who look rich are actually just high-income broke people, and you realize you've surpassed them in every way that actually matters. There's a common saying that the rich get richer, and usually people say it with a bit of bitterness. But at $75,000, you start to see why it's true. It's not a conspiracy. It's about the ability to say yes. Most people have to say no to opportunities because they require upfront capital or a period of instability. A friend has a brilliant business idea and needs a $10,000 seed investment? You have to say no if you're broke. A once-in-a-lifetime real estate deal comes up but requires a quick down payment? No. A chance to take a 3-month unpaid sabbatical to learn a new skill that could double your income? No. But at $75,000, you have an opportunity fund. You can afford to take a calculated risk. You can afford to buy into the things that move the needle. You're no longer just working for a salary. You're an investor in your own life. It's like when you're playing a game of Monopoly and you finally have enough cash to buy the orange and red properties. Suddenly, every time you move around the board, you aren't just trying to avoid paying rent, you're looking for ways to collect it. The whole game changes from defense to offense. I'll be honest with you, and this is the part that might sound a little strange. Hitting $75,000 is also when money starts to get a little bit boring. In the beginning, checking your accounts is an adrenaline rush. You see it go from $500 to $1,000, and you feel like a king. But as the numbers get bigger, the daily fluctuations matter less. You stop checking your Vanguard or Fidelity app every 4 hours. You might go weeks without looking at your net worth. This is actually a very healthy sign. It means that money has taken its proper place in your life. It's no longer the protagonist of your story. It's the supporting actor. It's the reliable infrastructure, like the plumbing in your house. You don't think about your plumbing every day, but you're sure glad it's there when you turn on the tap. When money becomes boring, you finally have the mental space to focus on the things that actually make a life worth living. Your relationships, your health, your hobbies, and your contribution to the world. You've solved the money problem, and now you get to work on the meaning problem. So if you're on the path to $75,000, I want you to take a second and just acknowledge how far you've already come. Whether you're at $5,000 or $50,000, you are doing the hard work of building the foundation. You're in the manual labor phase of wealth building. But I want you to keep your eyes on that click. Remember that $75,000 isn't just a number on a screen. It's a portal to a different version of yourself. It's the version of you that doesn't panic when the check engine light comes on. It's the version of you that speaks the truth at work because you aren't afraid of the consequences. It's the version of you that understands that wealth isn't about what you can get, it's about what you can give and how you can live. It's not going to happen overnight. There will be months where the market drops, and it feels like you're sliding backward. There will be months where a surprise expense eats up your entire savings goal. That's okay. That's just part of the climb. Keep pushing that boulder. You're getting closer to the crest of the hill than you think. And when you finally hit that $75,000 mark and you hear that click, you're gonna realize that all those no's you said to yourself over the years were actually the biggest yes you could have ever given to your future. You're doing great. Just keep going. I'll see you at the click.